In the mid-1850s, Edinburgh was a very different place from the city that we live in now. The city was really divided into two particular areas. You had the wealthy people living in the new town, but where Carrubbers is situated now in the old town, it was a place where there was great poverty and need. And in 1858 or thereabouts, three Christian men got together, they knelt and prayed together with a great burden to reach the poor of the old town. After praying, they decided that they were going to start a new mission that would particularly seek to meet the spiritual and physical needs of the poorer part of our city. And that's how Carrubbers was born. And they secured a building at the bottom of Carrubbers Close. Come out of Carrubbers, turn right, about 50 yards up on your right, you'll find the original Carrubbers Close. And it was at the bottom of that alley that they secured their first premises, and the work of Carrubbers Close Mission was born in 1858.
In 1873, two visitors came to Edinburgh, not as tourists from America. They came to preach the gospel. Dwight Lyman Moody and Moody Sankey. And Mr. Moody had heard of Carrubbers Close Mission, and he'd heard that they had an open air meeting every night, summer and winter. And so he decided to put the people to the test. He picked a very cold Edinburgh November evening, but there, faithfully, there was a group of the friends from Carrubbers Close Mission preaching the gospel. And these were people after Moody's own heart. And he said to them, listen, I'd like to join you in preaching the gospel. Book the biggest hall that you can get in Edinburgh, and let's have meetings there. And so the very first meeting in the assembly halls at the top of the Royal Mile, the place was packed to the rafters. And Mr. Sankey had his little organ, and Mr. Moody was there ready to preach. But there was a problem with that organ. A lot of the theologians in Edinburgh didn't like that organ. They called it the kist of whistles, the chest full of whistles. And they also said that the devil was in the pipes. But anyway, Mr. Sankey sat down and he started playing. And there was an excitable lady jumped up and she shouted, let me out. She said, what would John Knox say to the likes of this? And of course, it kind of ruined the meeting. And the evangelists, they were very discouraged, but they were there the next night. Now in Edinburgh at that time, there was a famous preacher, a household name, Horatius Bonner. Everyone knew Horatius Bonner is a godly, godly man. And he sat down right next to Sankey's organ. And Mr. Sankey sang a gospel song. And when he finished, there was a stillness came over the people. Horatius Bonner stood up, shook the hands of Moody Sankey, and he said publicly, he said, brother, you sang the gospel. And you know, from that moment on, they were accepted by the people of Edinburgh and indeed of Scotland. And you know, it was said that during that time that Moody and Sankey were in Edinburgh, that there was at least one person from every household came to a saving knowledge of the Lord Jesus. And it had an effect socially. The friends at Carrubbers, they kept police records, and they noted that during that time, the crime rate was reduced by 50%. Why? Because God had been changing lives through the preaching of the gospel.
Moody and Sankey returned to Edinburgh in the 1880s, the early 1880s. And at that time, Carrubbers was struggling a bit because they'd lost their premises at the bottom of Carrubbers Close. Moody and Sankey set about raising funds to build the building that we're sitting in today. And the story goes that at least as part of that fundraising exercise, Moody got a huge sheet and carried that sheet up and down the high street and other parts of the old town and asked people to throw their pennies or their sixpences or whatever it was from the windows of their homes into the sheet. And with that, and I suspect the support of some other wealthy men in the city, Moody succeeded in raising the £10,000 that was needed to build our building at 65 High Street.
In 1884, Mr. Moody came back to Edinburgh, and it was to open the new premises at 65 High Street. He laid the foundation stone, and actually, when you're leaving the building, if you look down at the entrance, there's a stone at the left-hand side with a little cross on it. Incidentally, he laid underneath it a copy of the Bible and some coins of the realm, which must still be there. But there was a huge crowd that gathered to see this momentous event, and they sang Rock of Ages, and Horatius Bonner was there, and he prayed that God's richest blessing would be upon that work. And you know, God answered that prayer abundantly above all that we could have ever asked or thought. And so we thank God for Mr. Moody, for Mr. Sankey, and we thank him for Carrubbers.